and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us tonight right here on The Right View. Before we get started, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, AMAC. As we approach another critical election, a wave of concern washes over America. Recent studies reveal that an astonishing 56% of our fellow citizens report feelings of anxiety or dread about the upcoming presidential election. That's why I stand with AMAC. AMAC is more than a senior discount organization. During these challenging times, they fight for common sense and hope that our nation returns to traditional American values. Visit amac.us/Lara today to seize an exclusive election year special, a 4-year AMAC membership for just $30. As an AMAC member, you not only enjoy money-saving benefits, but also the AMAC magazine, free Social Security and Medicare advice, a trusted voice in Washington, and a community of like-minded patriots who love this great nation. By becoming an AMAC member, you're strengthening a movement dedicated to preserving the principles we hold dear. Take advantage of this election year special, 4 years for $30, and be a part of the solution over the next 4 years. You can join now at amac.us/Lara. That's amac.us/LARA. Tonight, please welcome to the show Texas Congressman, friend to our family for a long time, Ronny Jackson. Ronnie, thank you so much for being with us here at The Right View. You and I have known each other for quite some time, but I think your backstory is interesting. And then how you ended up where you are as a congressman right now is interesting. You were an admiral in the Navy. You served several presidents. But I think the thing that people really know about you is how close you became to Donald Trump. Tell everybody that story, because I don't know that I've ever actually heard it from your perspective.
Thanks, Lara. I appreciate you having me. Yeah, when you guys came on board, when President Trump came on board and the family, first came to the White House, I didn't know President Trump. I had met him in passing just one time, because as you mentioned, I was at the White House on active duty for 14 years. I was a Navy Admiral, emergency medicine physician, physician to the president, ran the White House medical unit. I did that for 14 years for Bush, Obama, and then ultimately for Trump. But look, by the time the Obama administration was over, I had already reached the rank of Rear Admiral, kind of maxed out rank-wise. I'd already had over 20 years in. I was looking forward to retiring. My wife was looking forward to coming back home to Texas. I was going to, do some consulting, sit on some boards, make some money because I'd been, on my Navy salary my whole life, and so I was kind of looking forward to that aspect of it. But what happened is, like I said, I'd not met President Trump, and then he got elected, and President Trump and Mrs. Trump came up to the White House for the traditional tea that they have, and President Obama and Mrs. Obama met him there, and President Trump and President Obama came in through the diplomatic reception room, and my office, of course, is on the ground floor of the White House in the cross hall there, directly below the president's bedroom, right next to the diplomatic reception room. And they came through the diplomatic reception room, and President Obama walked into my office with President Trump, and he said, "Hey, I just want to introduce you to Dr. Ronny Jackson. Ronnie's a Navy Admiral. He's my doctor. This is where he works. You'll have a doctor here too as well. It won't be Ronnie because he's leaving when I leave, but you'll have another doctor here, Navy or Army doc or something. They'll be taking care of you." And President Trump was like, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you." That's the only time I'd met him. And then fast forward to inauguration day, whenever it was time to turn over, I had decided I was going to stay. And the way that worked out was I was, like I said, planning to leave. But a lot of the folks that were on the Trump transition team were from the Bush administration, because President Trump and the Trump team did what everybody does. They reached out to the last group that had been there to get some advice on how to set everything up, not having ever been in the White House before. And so a lot of these Bush folks that came in to help set up the West Wing and, and get everything set up, I had worked with them in the Bush administration, taking care of them and their kids and things of that nature. And they knew me. So they had talked me into staying and wanted me to stay, long term. And I told them, I said, "Look, I'm not going to stay. I'm getting out. I've already got plans." I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll stay for 2 or 3 months. I'll find a suitable replacement that you guys are happy with. I'll do a good turnover, but then I'm getting out." And they said, "Okay." They conceded. "You just commit to stay to, 3 to 6 months, and then you're moving on." So that's my plan was. But what happened was I got to know President Trump really quickly. And I tell people, I think I got to know him a little faster than most people do because I'd been there long enough. I was kind of savvy on how to do this, right? So, I tell people, if you're at the White House with President Trump and, he's up for 3 hours before anybody else even shows up at the White House for work, right? He's upstairs talking on the phone, watching TV, sending out tweets, whatever, he's really,
all hours of the night, Ronnie. You'll get a call or a text from Donald Trump. I know he doesn't sleep. He's amazing.
No, he sleeps 4 to 5 hours a night at the absolute most, right? But, he's up way early before anyone else shows up. And I knew this. So starting the very first day of that administration, I decided I'm going to have to get to know this guy. I'm going to be his physician. I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to take care of you guys and the family. I've got to get to know everybody, right? So I have an earpiece in all day long, listening to the Secret Service, right? Every time the president moves from one location to another, they call it out. As you know, his call sign was mogul. So they'd be like, mogul, moving to the elevator, mogul, moving here, moving to this room, to that room. And so I would be in my office in the morning before he came down with the earpiece in. When I would hear them say, mogul, moving to elevator, I would get up and I would go to my door of my office and I would stand there. And his elevator's right across the hall from my door to my office. So he would pop down. And like I said, he's been up for 3 hours and he's spun up. He's looking for somebody to talk to at that point, right? He walks out of the elevator. I'm the first person he sees. And I'd say, good morning, Mr. President. He'd say, morning, Doc. And he'd walk over and he'd say, did you see this or did you see that? And it would be whatever was going on that day, in the world on the news. Never had anything to do with anything medical, but whatever it was. And I'd say, yes, sir. We'd start talking about it, right? And we'd start talking. He'd be like, walk with me. So I'd walk down the West Colonnade with him, walk down the Oval Colonnade. We'd walk in the back of the Oval Office and we'd finish up our conversation. And, whoever was up first to see him that morning, whether it was National Security Advisor or the CIA briefer or the Chief of Staff or whoever, they'd be in the outer Oval waiting to come in. And when I was done, I'd walk out, they'd walk in as day would start. But I was pretty much the first person to see him every morning. I'd be the last person to see him every evening. He never left the White House without me. I was by his side, always within 1 or 2 minutes away, whether he was on Air Force One or the helicopter or at the hotel in the hold, no matter where he was at. And so I spent an incredible amount of time with him, and I got to really quickly know him, and I developed incredible respect for the man. I mean, I really, really appreciated who he was, what he stood for, and just the way he handled himself. It was so unique from what I'd seen in my entire time at the White House, and it was so effective. And so I just developed a lot of respect for him, and I was honored to work for him. Those 3 to 6 months came and went, and I never for 1 second thought about leaving the White House. I loved my job more than I ever had. Wow. And, I've been really privileged to have worked for him, and I'm looking forward to working for him again.
Wow. Amen to that. Well, it's so funny because you're not the first person to experience what it's like when you say, you know what, I think I'm all set with this when it comes to Donald Trump. He somehow just keeps people in his orbit. No matter what, it's almost like it's a magnetic situation. It's sort of hard to explain, but it's amazing.
Well, I'll tell you too, Laura, it's fun to work for him. It's really fun. It's an exciting place to work, the Trump White House, right?
Oh, yeah.
People were like, well, hey, what was it? Why do you like working for President Trump so much more than the previous presidents you worked for? And I thought about it one day and I said, you know what? I'm not real sure. Let me think. And I thought, you know what? I said, I think I know. I said, I'm an emergency medicine physician, right? I picked that specialty for a reason. It's right for my personality, right? And when you're an emergency medicine doc, you spend a lot of time with people that aren't there for emergencies. And, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a room full of little kids with runny noses out there waiting to see. It's not really why you signed up to be an emergency medicine doc, right. But every shift at some point or another, somebody bursts through the doors with a butcher knife sticking out of their chest, right? And that's what you live for. And that's what working in the Trump administration was like every day. It was awesome.
And every day it was as though someone had burst in the doors with a butcher knife stabbed in their chest. So funny. Well, yeah, I mean, to your point, by the way, I can't imagine a more exciting place to work. I never personally worked in the Trump White House, but I know that it was full of stories and crazy happenings. And I mean, my gosh, the 4 years that Donald Trump was in office, look at all the things he got accomplished. Look at all the crazy things they were trying to do from the outside to this man. It's amazing. But you got to travel the world with him. As you said, you were always like 1 to 2 minutes away. You were there in case there was an emergency. Are there any stories that people maybe don't know about? Anything that you think would be like a good story to tell about traveling the world with President Donald Trump?
Well, I'll just tell you, Laura, the first time we went overseas, when you go on an overseas trip, people don't realize how taxing these are. When you come on board and you're the mill aide or you're the doctor or part of the medical team or the Secret Service or the senior staff that are traveling with him, you get on that plane and you fly to wherever you're going. And sometimes you fly to the other side of the planet. You're in the air for, 13 to 17 hours. You get up and, it's 9 o'clock in the morning when you leave and you land on the other side of the planet. And guess what? It's 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning again. And you have a full 12 to 14 hour day ahead of you. That same group of people that got on the plane who didn't sleep for the most part on the plane and are seriously fatigued, including the president, get off that plane and they work a full day. And I'll tell you what, I've seen this for years and years at the White House. And by the time that day's over, when it's 9, 10 o'clock at night, or maybe 11 sometimes, and you're in that elevator and it's time to go back, it's time to go up to your room and go to sleep, you are so ready to just go to bed. And I would tell you, I was astonished the first few times I was with President Trump, because we get in that elevator and everybody was looking at each other like, oh my God, this has been an unbelievably long day. I cannot wait to just go to bed. And somebody would mention, hey, there's a bunch of supporters down in the lobby that'd like to say hi or whatever. And he would be like, let's go see them. And everybody like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And he would just be fired up to go out, and he would go out there and he would talk to them and he'd visit with them. And we'd spend, another 40 minutes out there and he just has incredible energy. He's a bottomless pit of energy and enthusiasm, and he loves his job, and I think that's one of the best things about him. I think one of my favorite stories at the White House about just who he is, and one of my favorite days there, despite the fact that it ultimately ended up kind of not going the way everybody had intended. But the day that he nominated me for Secretary of the VA, that was just an incredible day. I mean, it started off the night before on Air Force One. We're coming back from Florida, and he walks past my cabin on Air Force One, and he says, "Hey, Doc, come up front. I need to talk to you about something." I went up, and I didn't know what he's going to talk to me about. I came up to his office, and he said, "I want you to do something for me." And I said, "Yes, sir. What do you want?" And he goes, "I want you to be a member of my cabinet." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, he goes, "I want you to be my VA secretary." And it just came out of nowhere. I had no idea that was coming, right? But, he said, "Look, Ronnie," he said, "you're the right guy for this job, man." He goes, "You're in the military." He goes, "You're about to be a veteran. You got kids in the military." He goes, "Every time we talk about these issues regarding the military, the veterans or whatever, you always bring it back to what, how's it good? How's it right? Or what's the, how is it good for the veterans, or what's the right thing to do for the veterans?" He goes, "You're not, manipulated by the bureaucracy and the overwhelming budget and all the other stuff that drive people to make the wrong decisions." He goes, "You're the right person for the job." He goes, "Go home and talk to your wife about it." And he goes, "This is what we need to do." And it was incredible. I went home, I talked to my wife, and she was all on board. And there's a whole backstory behind this, because there was some deep state stuff going on with General Kelly and some other folks that were there that had already picked the VA secretary, unbeknownst to me, and obviously without the president's input. They had already decided who they thought was going to take that job, and this tipped the apple cart pretty extensively. So a lot of stuff happened after that. But you know what? The next morning I got up and I was walking him to work, like I was talking about, walking down the West Colonnade, and he told me, he said, he goes, "Are we going to do this?" And I said, "Yes, sir, we're going to do it." And he goes, "Go back to your office, get your ducks in a row." And he said, "I'm going to go talk to General Kelly." And he said, we're going to make it happen." And I said, "We're going to do it today?" And he goes, "Yeah, we're doing it today." He goes, "It's happening today." And I was like, so it was crazy. I went back to my office and I was waiting to go back over there, and I didn't hear anything for a while. And General Kelly had pushed back, and I told him General Kelly wanted to drag it out a little bit and not do it right away, but do it in a few weeks or whatever. And he didn't agree with that. He's like, no, we're doing it now. And so he said, "You let me take care of General Kelly." So I knew the two of them were going to talk about that. I hadn't heard anything. I was in my office, and I figured, well, I guess General Kelly won that argument, right? Or won that fight there, because I would have heard about something by now if we were doing this today. And about that time, Hope Hicks and Sarah Sanders walk into my office, and they got these big grins on their face, and they're like, "Congratulations!" And I was like, and as far as I knew, nobody even knew about it, right? And so I said, "Are you talking about the president potentially nominating me for the Secretary of the VA?" And they looked at me, and I can't remember which one it was, but one of them said, "Ronnie, do you know what's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" They're like, "Well, you better get over there right now. He's going to do it in 30 minutes. And I was like, "What?" And so I ran over there. I ran over to the West Wing, and everybody was in there, Scavino and the VP and Hope and Sarah. And just there were tons of people in there, and people were patting me on the back, calling me Mr. Secretary. It was pretty cool. And he was working on the tweet right there on the desk. And Dan had given me the tweet. He chopped it, gave it back to Dan. Dan had brought it back. And when he got it right, he took the tweet that Dan had printed out on a piece of paper, and he signed his name on it, and he handed it to me, and he said, "Welcome to the big leagues, Doc." And that was it. It was over. And it was awesome. It was just such a cool day, just the way it happened. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one to remember. So I have to ask you, I'm always curious about this. Whenever you have a lot of titles, right? Obviously, doctor, then secretary, then congressman. Where does everything fall in line? And I'm always like, if there's a doctor who becomes a senator or a congressman, I'm like, what? How do I address this person? What do you think? How should we go about this?
Well, I'll tell you, the least impressive title is congressman, right? That's at the bottom. Not necessarily an impressive group of people a lot of times. I mean, there's some great members of Congress, but in general, sometimes you look around and you're like, man, anybody can get this job, right?
But that's an accolade.
Yeah.
Look, and I want to ask you about that in a second about getting in politics. But how do you where do you stack those?
Well, people some people call me congressman, some people call me doctor, some people call me admiral. The one that I worked the hardest for.
Admiral too, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I forgot about that one.
Admiral was a big accomplishment. I like that title. Doctor is a good one, but I tell people, like, I try my best to tell people, like, I just want people to call me Ronnie. You know what I mean? I am not anything special in this job I'm in. I am just another member of, I'm another citizen of this country. I just happen to be the one that the 13th Congressional District of Texas sent to D.C. to be their voice and to represent them. Doesn't make me special, doesn't give me any special privilege, or it shouldn't, right? And so I tell people, just call me Ronnie. I just want to be, I just want to be like everybody else. And I want to be doing what's right for all of us and taking care of, our future and the future of our kids and our grandkids. And I don't need a special title to do that.
All right, quickly, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Swiss America. Our country's facing so many problems these days under Joe Biden. The last thing any of us need is more to worry about. Unfortunately, we now have to fear losing our freedom and privacy with the Democrats' new push for a digital dollar that could allow the government to tell us what we can and cannot buy with our own hard-earned money. That's why I'm encouraging every one of you tuning into the show right now to get The Secret War on Cash, an insightful report created by my friends at Swiss America. With this report, you'll learn how to protect yourself from the threats facing our freedom and your hard-earned money. The report is available right now to my listeners free of charge. Just call 1-800-289-2646 or visit www.swissamerica.com/Trump for your free report. All right, if you suffer from chronic pain, listen up. Here's a way to help you get real relief. As a fitness fanatic, I understand that recovery is just as important as the workout itself. But whether you're recovering from an injury or just looking for everyday relief from pain in your joints and muscles, nerve pain, fibrosis, and inflammation, I recommend Golden Revive Plus from Up Wellness. This advanced all-natural formula combines 6 powerful anti-inflammatory ingredients, including a proprietary turmeric extract that's 200 times stronger than raw turmeric. All of this to address the root cause of your pain, reducing scarring, swelling, and tissue damage using the healing powers of nature to help your body heal itself. Formulated by husband and wife team Doctors Josh and Amanda Levitt, Golden Revive Plus gives you real pain relief and better range of motion, plus better heart, eye, and brain health. Join the over 300,000 Americans who are already using Golden Revive Plus to get and stay pain-free. For a limited time, you can try Golden Revive Plus for 30% off at goldenrevive.com. Just use promo code Trump at checkout. Amen. Well, I mean, you say that Congress is a rough group of people. I don't disagree with you there. But let me ask you this. Are you glad that you are now in Congress and don't have to answer for Joe Biden's health to the media? Because we know they got crazy with Donald Trump. Could you imagine Congressman Jackson having Dr. Jackson, Admiral Jackson, having to answer to the media for Joe Biden right now? Oh, my gosh.
I could not imagine that. I probably would have had to quit my job immediately. It's insane. And it just goes back to the point, like, why isn't the doctor that takes care of him, who I know, by the way, who worked for me for 8 years. He worked for me for 8 years. He was Biden's physician while he was vice president, and he worked for me.
Wow.
And he's not a great doctor, and he's definitely not a man of character, I would say. So it doesn't surprise me that this is the way this has gone. He's literally part of the Biden family, and he'll do or say anything to cover up for them, which I think is what he's doing right now. And, the fact that he won't get up in front of the press and brief the president's health the way that I did with President Trump and just answer any and all questions.
Well, and they're not even asking the questions. Isn't that the craziest part to you?
That is crazy.
Suddenly the media is not interested. Remember when you had to get up there and talk about Donald Trump, about literally his physical and mental health? Am I right? Didn't you have to do that?
They were relentless, Lara. And you know what? The
Yeah.
reason we did the cognitive test was because, President Trump, we were preparing to do his physical, and they had tried everything they could to get rid of him, all the scandals, anything they could come up with. So as a last ditch effort, they said, well, let's say he's not mentally and physically fit to be the president, right? They didn't have anything to hang their hat on that, certainly not the mental stuff, but they didn't like his style. They didn't like his tweets. They didn't like his attitude. And they were like, because they didn't like who he was, we're going to say, like, this man's not mentally or cognitively fit to be the president, right? So you know what we did? It's never been done before. Never, and a U.S. president's never taken one before, but we took a bold step, and I talked to the president about this, and he wasn't the least bit worried about it. Neither was I. We administered a cognitive test to him, right? A cognitive screening test. He got 30 out of 30, got a perfect score, and we dropped that on them the day that we did the physical exam. I stood up there for an hour and 20 minutes and defended his physical and his cognitive objective data that we got, right? I defended every bit of it. And it took the wind out of their sails. They didn't know what to do after that, right? It completely took it off the table. It just went away. They completely stopped talking about it because we just buried it. We put it to bed, right? Well, if ever we've had a president that needed a cognitive exam, for God's sake, it's the guy we have now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. So President Trump, they were the ones, the far left, the liberal, the mainstream media, they were the ones that demanded that Donald Trump get a cognitive test. Well, he did. He got it. He passed it with flying colors. Guess what? They set the precedent. The precedent has been set now. Where are the calls for Joe Biden to get this cognitive test? I have sent 5 letters to the White House demanding that his doctor, and his cabinet, that they get this test done and make it available to the American people the same way that President Trump did. They won't do it. And the reason they won't do it is obvious to everyone, because it would be a miserable failure, right? He would fail it. He wouldn't even get the first 3 questions right, which are just to identify 3 animals, right? He couldn't do that part of it, right? And everyone knows it. So, it's a lot of hypocrisy and double standard here when it comes to the press, and they're pushing back on the president's cognitive ability.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if there were ever a time, as you say, that we needed, it's now. This is the person who is the leader of the free world, our commander in chief. This is the most important thing to have confidence in this person. And unfortunately, we do not have that. But I want to ask you about actually getting involved in politics. Was that part of the plan ever? It kind of sounds like you had, as you were mentioning in the beginning, planning to kind of like retire, sail off into the sunset, get some kind of cushy, high-paying job that would be, just something you could kind of retire with. How did all this happen? Because you are one of, I think, the more outspoken, most beloved members of Congress. Certainly, my father-in-law thinks so highly of you, and you really embraced politics in a way that I think is very impressive. How did that all come about? Were you inspired in some way by Donald Trump?
Absolutely. Well, one thing led to another. I would never be here if it weren't for Donald Trump. I mean, it just wouldn't happen, because what kicked the whole thing off was the nomination for the VA secretary. What I didn't know is that day that I stood up before the press and I did his physical. I was on active duty. I was an active duty Navy admiral, emergency medicine physician, White House physician, assigned on active duty at the White House. He'd also taken care of Obama and Bush. I was standing up there giving objective data about his physical, and I didn't say what they wanted me to say. I didn't realize it at the time. I was a little bit naive, but that was the day that the far left and the mainstream media decided that if they could ever cut my heart out, they were going to do it, right? And I went on about my way, and then he nominated me for the secretary of the VA. One thing led to another. The people, behind the scenes, I referenced a little bit earlier, some of the deep state folks that had already picked somebody. Everything came into play, and they started these wild, crazy, made-up accusations started coming out of Tester's office and different places, and trying to tear my nomination down. And they were running them nonstop on MSNBC and CNN. And I was unfortunate that nothing else was going on for a couple of weeks, and all it was just tearing me down for a couple of weeks. Well, I had never been through anything like that before, Lara. I was not, not only was I naive before it happened to me, but when it happened to me, I wasn't the person then that I am now. And had I been, it would have been a little bit different. But you know what? It was really hard on my family. They were camped out at the bottom of my driveway. My family couldn't leave. My kids couldn't go to school. My wife couldn't go to the grocery store. They were harassing me. They were harassing my family. There's all these made up stories, crazy made up garbage. Like Dr. Jackson apparently had, went to a Secret Service party one night, got drunk and wrecked a government vehicle. Are you kidding me? Any two-bit investigator could figure out whether that did or didn't happen.
Yeah, but they don't care, Ronnie. They don't care if it's a lie, as long as it's clickbait and as long as it makes you look bad. Google my name if you want a real laugh, and you can see some of the garbage they put out about those of us in my family. So I commiserate with you on that.
That's absolutely true. You know it to be firsthand. That's absolutely true. And you know, they cycle this stuff up. You know, it's crazy because I've never even been to a Secret Service party. I've never in my entire life been in an accident involving alcohol, and I never wrecked the government. It's crazy, right? So if you go back and you look in the Washington Post from about a year earlier, that actually happened to a Secret Service agent. He went to a Christmas party, he got drunk, and then he wrecked his government. It was like they took the exact story, cut his name out of it,
plug your name in
it, and then recycled it, right? And then they spread it everywhere. Like you said, it was completely untrue. And nobody even bothered to check and see if it was true. But there was all kinds of stories like this going on. So I kind of, at one point, it was starting to drag down the president's agenda for the veterans. He was doing awesome things for the veterans already with the Mission Act and the program he was for choice and all this stuff that he was giving them. It was incredible. And so it was starting to drag down the actual VA, not just the nomination process. So I went to the president. I told him I was going to withdraw my nomination. He didn't want me to, obviously. He's like, look, you know, he said, I want you to stay. And, you know, so we talked about it, and I eventually ended up withdrawing my nomination. He didn't want me to leave. He said, well, I want you to stay. He wanted me to go back to being his physician again, but I didn't really want to do that at the time because the doc that I turned over to was doing a great job. And I'd already been kind of looking for an exit strategy. I've been doing that for so long. But he said, look, I want you to stay. I'd be the chief medical advisor, assistant to the president. So that was a more of a policy job. It was a policy job, not a clinical job. So I thought, okay, look, I'll do that. That'll be a nice break from some of the clinical stuff. So I stayed on board as assistant to the president, as chief medical advisor. But you know what, Lara, my heart wasn't in it. I was like so disgusted. I was like, I want out of this damn place. I can't stand DC anymore. The people here are disgusting. It's a swamp. It's a sewer. I just want to go home to Texas. I can't stand this place anymore. And it just kept going. It got worse and worse. And as the next few months went on, I just got more and more of an increasing uneasy feeling. I didn't know where it was going to lead me, what I was going to do. And then one day I turned the TV on and I saw that the representative from the 13th Congressional District, who had been here for 26 years, was unexpectedly at the last possible moment saying he wasn't going to run again. And I looked at that TV that day, and this is back in October of 2019, right? And everybody, I don't care who you were on the right or left or whatever, everybody was convinced that Donald Trump was getting a second term because all of the indicators that are out there, it's economy or whatever else, were through the roof, and people had already conceded that he's getting a second term. That was before COVID and all the garbage that followed after that, right? You know, all the fraud and everything that happened after that. But so I looked at that TV that day and I said, man, Donald Trump's getting a second term. I said, I've already got 20 plus years in, and it's time for me to retire. I could go there and I could do that job and I could represent those folks in Texas without doing anything, without changing anything about who I am, what I think, everything about me, it lines up with it. And so I thought to myself, this is an unbelievable opportunity to get in the fight and do something about what's going on in this country. Not talk about it, not bitch about it, not complain about it, but do something about it. So I went to work that day. That was it morning when I was getting ready for work. I went to work that day. I walked around the White House all day. By the end of the day, I walked into the Oval Office. The president was in there working. I walked right past the Oval Secretary. I said, sir, I got something I got to talk to you about. He said, what is it? And I said, I'm leaving. And he goes, what? He thought maybe something was wrong with my family or something. I said, no, I'm running for office. And he's like, what? You're running where? So because we never, but that when I walked out of there, by the time I walked in that office, I didn't even think it was an opportunity anymore. I feel like it was a duty to get in the fight and do something about it. But I'll tell you, it's the best decision I ever made, Laura, because when I decided I was going to do it, I was like, you know what? This is how this ends. It doesn't end the way they wanted it to end. This is how this ends. I'm going to get elected to Congress, and these morons, these idiots, these deep state traitors are going to have to deal with me in Congress. And so that's why I'm there, and that's what drives me every day to go to work, is because I'm there for a reason. I could have got out, like you said. I could have had a pretty cush life. I could have made a lot of money based on my experience, and had a lot of things I don't have today. But I don't care. There's more to life than money, and I'm here because I'm terrified at what's happening in this country. And it started off, it was bad at the very beginning of the Trump administration, and they came after him with everything they got, and it got worse and worse. But during the 3.5 years of the Biden administration, oh my God, I can't believe what they've done to this country. They're destroying this country and who we are. And if we don't get Donald Trump back in the White House, immediately, if we don't get him back in the White House right now, we are going to lose this country, and we're never going to get it back, never. And so I'm one of the soldiers on the front line. I'm proud to be MAGA. I'm proud to be, in the front lines, leading the charge with President Trump. That's what I was meant to do, and I finally figured out where I was supposed to be and how I'm supposed to be doing it, and that's who I am.
Well, you are exactly where you are supposed to be, and you do amazing work. And thank you for being in the fight. Thank you for taking this on. It's so easy to kind of, as you say, like bitch about it and say like, oh, this is bad, this is bad. But you got to get in the fight. And really, as we kind of wrap this up today, I would love to get your thoughts, and maybe you can speak to the people of this country right now and talk about, you touched on it, but this really is a vital election. And from the perspective of the RNC, obviously, we've got to get Donald Trump back at the top. We've got to reelect him and make sure he's our 47th president. But we also want to help you guys out in Congress. We have to expand our lead in the House. That is so important if we actually want a president who's able to make lasting change. We have to get a majority in the Senate as well. And so these are things I want everybody to hear from you, Congressman Ronny Jackson, about why those things are so important as we head into, I think, the most vital and crucial election season we will ever have in this country. We've certainly ever had in our lifetimes. What is at stake, and why is it so important not just to have Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, but to pay attention to the down ballot races like yours and like so many people across the country so that we can ensure lasting change once everybody is in office?
Well, you're absolutely right, Lara. Pay attention to all the down ballot races. Doesn't matter how far down they go. We know what happens when we don't pay attention to races like school board and county judge and things like that, right? That's where the rot starts a lot of times, right? So we have to get it all back across the board. I'll tell people, you got to go out and you got to educate yourself. Find somebody you trust. If that's me, that's fine. I'm willing to do that. I do that for a lot of people. President Trump does endorsements. He nominates people, or he endorses people, right? Follow the lead. Don't just pick somebody just because they have an R next to their name doesn't mean anything, right? We can't just pick Republicans anymore. We have to pick the right Republicans, right? And Laura, like I said, I'm not the same person now that I was then. One of the biggest things that changed about me, and I learned this in a large part from the Trump family, I learned this from your family, is I don't give a damn what they say about me anymore, right? I don't care, right? And you have to develop that attitude. You have to get to the point where you do not care what they say about you, because they're going to try everything they can. They're going to call you a racist and a homophobe and everything they can possibly think of, because human nature is to retreat when they attack you like that. And don't pick the people that are going to stand their ground. They're out there. They're running. We got to find them. We got to prop them up. We got to support them. We got to win the House back, or we got to make sure we keep the House, right? That's going to be a big thing. It's not going to be an easy thing to do this time. There's only about 20 seats that are in play right now, right? And so we could conceivably lose the House and win the Senate and even win the White House and lose the House. We can't afford to do that. When President Trump goes back in next year, he needs to have all the tools at his disposal. He needs to have the House and the Senate fully behind him. So we got to keep the House, right? We got to grow a majority in the House. We got to make sure that we win the Senate back, because we have to have the Senate. It's so important. And then, but the most important thing, none of it happens if President Trump is not back in the White House. That's the only way we make this happen. So I tell people, go out, get aggressive, register people to vote, tell people to vote early, get them out and get them to register their neighbors. There's so many people that, like we talked about, Laura, that are disgusted with what's going on, but they don't vote and they don't register to vote. Make sure you know when the deadline for registration is in your district, in your state, and make sure you go out and find as many people like-minded as you possibly can. Get them registered to vote and get those ballots. Get them in early. I don't care anymore. We used to say wait till election day. We're going to play by their rules now. We're going to go out and we're going to harvest ballots. We're going to do everything. If it's legal, we're going to do it. And we've got to take this country back. And the only way we're going to do it is if everybody gets aggressive about it.
That's exactly right. From Congressman Dr. Admiral Ronny Jackson's mouth to everyone's ears out there. We appreciate you so much, Ronny. Thank you for everything you do truly for this country. You are a patriot. We appreciate it very, very much. Keep the fight. We've got your back. We're working hard, and we are working alongside you to save this country. So, Ronny Jackson, thank you for joining us here on The Right View. To everybody at home, as always, thank you for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.
And I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out.
Nothing is worse than being on a phone call that drops. Nothing is worse than trying to text someone and you can't reach them because your phone is out of service range. And nothing is worse than supporting these major corporations and companies who don't support us. That is why I love Patriot Mobile. They are America's only Christian conservative wireless network. They use every cell tower out there available to all networks so that they have the greatest 4G and 5G coverage nationwide, and they support the causes that are important to us as conservatives. If you go today to patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump and use the promo code Trump, you will get free activation today. Again, that is patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump. The promo code is Trump for free activation so that you can get a great cell plan and feel good about doing it.